So not too long ago I reviewed a $75 iPhone 7 clone, and for the price it was really quite impressive. But now for just $20 more, the iPhone 7 Plus clone is a different beast altogether. So whilst in terms of its build quality, where the iPhone 7 clone was truly amazing, so good that it almost made you doubt how much the original iPhone 7 cost, it fell down when it came to software and performance. So let's see if the 7 Plus clone can pick up where it left off. So to begin with, it feels just as good from the outside. It's hard to use with one hand and a tad on the slippery side, but those are both problems you have with the original iPhone 7 Plus. The clone has an identical thickness, but is nearly 20 grams lighter than the original, which does make it feel slightly less premium, but nonetheless it feels strong, solid, and definitely more than you'd expect a $90 device too. It also helps that the company this time around has absolutely nailed the packaging and presentation. It looks exactly as you'd expect an Apple product too. It comes with a screen protector, manuals, as well as the lightning earphones and the charger. So with the Plus clone, you're also getting a bump in resolution as opposed to the standard clone. And with a PPI of 267, it's not quite Retina quality, which hovers around 326, but at the same time it's not abysmal. We've seen worse at a higher price. Now surprisingly, the colour representation wasn't half bad either, but unfortunately the display suffers from a huge amount of glare, waving it even 30 degrees either way and you just can't see it, and in broad daylight, the reflections make it almost impossible. Now moving on to the software, I was honestly really impressed. Now bear in mind that it's probably neither as functional as the latest version of Android or iOS 10, but the lengths they've actually gone to recreate that iPhone experience is truly remarkable. Every single app, the control center, the notifications, the animations is all intact from iOS, and performing your day-to-day tasks like changing a wallpaper is done in exactly the same way. It's terrifyingly realistic. Now interestingly, they've also tried to introduce Force Touch without the haptic feedback, so essentially you're just pressing a capacitive key and it doesn't give as good a response as just a standard iPhone home button. Now internally, we've got the MT6580 and 1GB of RAM, and that sounds almost identical to the original iPhone 7 clone, but the 1GB of RAM here as opposed to the 512MB before makes a world of difference. All of a sudden it flies through the software. Everything you want to do on this phone in terms of UI just works. In terms of gaming, it's functional. You can play pretty much every 2D game, and with that spacious screen, they look and feel really good. Having said that, I would not recommend this as a gaming phone. Not only can you just get better performance out of an equivalently priced Android phone, but the software on this phone is a little bit weird when it comes to games. Every now and again, without any warning, it'll just quit. On top of that, 3D gaming just isn't going to happen. Now, as much as I was expecting the camera on this phone to be an absolute disaster, it turns out it was quite the opposite. No, it's not going to have the iPhone 7's fancy optical zoom. In fact, one of the lenses on here is literally just a piece of glass, but the photos it takes are just as good as any equivalently priced Android phone. And as you can see, they've totally ripped the iOS software in terms of camera as well, and for the most part that's a good thing. As you'd expect from a 13-megapixel sensor, it produces pretty good detail with enough lighting, but unfortunately that disintegrates quite quickly as you tone down the brightness. It's got a natural color palette, but occasionally does blow out highlights, but generally speaking the HDR is quite good. Unfortunately, it's not great in terms of macro, it just will not focus on any object closer than about 15 centimeters. When it does finally lock, it looks pretty good, but it's just difficult to get that. On top of that, it's not got a very fast shutter time, so you have to hold the phone very steady and make sure your subject is still. On the other hand, the front camera I was really quite impressed with. It handles HDR well and produces bright, vibrant images. The speaker is exactly the same as on the iPhone 7 replica, which is to say it's actually rather good. It only produces mono sound, and it's not as detailed as the original iPhone 7, but it's better than most phones at the price. Whilst in terms of capacity alone, the battery is very similar between this and the original iPhone 7 Plus, but it just doesn't last anywhere near as long. It's not terrible, mind you, you'll be able to get a full day with no problems, but you just won't get much more. Unfortunately, the phone is limited by two major things. It's got 8GB of non-expandable storage and maxes out at 3G signal. So there we go guys, that is the iPhone 7 Plus clone. This was just a quick overview of the phone so you know what to look for, because I've seen a lot of people trying to sell these as iPhone 7 Pluses. Whilst from the outside it may look convincing, the clone phone can't hold a match to the original. With the real iPhone 7 Plus, you've literally got the king of gaming smartphones in your hand. You can play just about any game you can think of. Whereas with this phone, you'd be lucky if you can even work a 3D title. Yes, they've put an impressive amount of effort into the software, but the more you use it, the more you realise that it's not iOS 10 and that it's really form over function. Thanks a lot for watching, I'm Mrwhosetheboss, and I'm signing out.